Good afternoon. I'm Attorney Benjamin Crump, the lead counsel for the family of Trayvon Martin. First, I want to publicly thank Attorney Gary Farmer and his law firm, Farmer, Yaffe, and Wising, for allowing us to have this meeting here today to share with you this information involving this, but it's far too long for the family journey to justice. I come here today on behalf of Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin. Sabrina is emotionally and physically exhausted. She's cried out. She's been doing as many interviews as she can. She's gotten all your requests. Right now, she's just exhausted. So I pray that you all understand that she wants to get information out to you to get justice for her son, but at this point she needs rest and prayers. Also, Mr. Martin is trying to accommodate you best he can. He's trying to continue to work and try to maintain his job while he continues to grieve, and also while he struggles for justice to hold the person who killed his son accountable. We took another step in this, what has been a daily journey for the past 3.5 weeks. Mr. Martin, on Sunday evening, was working with his cell phone account, trying to figure out Trayvon's password, and he looked on it and he saw who the last person was that Trayvon Martin talked to while he was alive. He called me late Sunday night and told me that he had called the young lady, and he told me, and I was just utterly shocked when he told me the time that they talked. They had talked all that day, about 400 minutes, starting that morning to the afternoon, like many teenagers do. They talk on the phones, and all his family and friends knew Trayvon would have his earplugs in his ear, and he would have his phone on his side in his pocket. It was no different that day. His father and mother talked about a lot of times they will wake up and he'll be on the phone talking to his friends. Well, what George Zimmerman said to the police about him being suspicious and up to no good is completely contradicted by this phone log, showing all day he was just talking to his friends. And in fact, he was talking to this young lady when he went to the 7-Eleven and when he came back from the 7-Eleven. And I'm going to get into that in detail because her testimony that's shown on these phone logs connects the dots, completely connects the dots of this whole thing. Ladies and gentlemen, it's really important to note, and you can follow along because we now have the 911 calls and we have Zimmerman's call to the phone, the police dispatcher. And you can follow audio every account now. Never in any account other than George Zimmerman, this neighborhood association, loose cannon, does anybody say that Trayvon Martin was up to no good, that he seemed high or anything. And in fact, this young lady details it completely, the tone of the conversation and the nature of the conversation and what was happening the last minutes of his life. Now, I will ask you, her parents does not in any way want to reveal her identity. She is a minor. Her parents are very worried about her. She is traumatized over this. This was her really, really close personal friend. They were dating. And so it's a situation where to know that You were the last person to talk to the young man who you thought was one of the most special people in the world to you, and know that he got killed moments after he was talking to you. Is just riveting to this young lady. In fact, she couldn't even go to his wake. She was so sick, her mother had to take her to the hospital, and she spent the night in the hospital. She is traumatized beyond anything that you could imagine. And we all were teenagers, so we can imagine how that is when you think somebody is really special in your teenage years. You call it puppy love or whatever you want to call it. And then suddenly and tragically, it's taken away, and you have, unfortunately, a first-hand account of it. So I will ask you again on behalf of the family and on behalf of the young lady's family, if you would please respect their privacy. She is a minor. Now, with details, that day, Trayvon Martin, 17 years old, 3 weeks, weighing about 140 to 150 pounds, soaking wet, as his mother says, and that's with his shoes on, leaves to go to the store to get some snacks before the NBA All-Star game is about to start. His little stepbrother asked for him to bring some Skittles back and something to drink. He is talking to the young lady as he walks to the store. The phone records show, and you will get copies of these phone records, they will show you the times the calls were made and how long he was on the phone. And it is without any doubt that he's on the phone the entire time during the day, especially when he is going to that store and coming back. You will see that he goes to the store talking to her, and then when he comes back, he's talking to her. And this is what she relays. And I'll share with you some of the audio. We're going to turn this over to the Department of Justice and their investigation, because the family does not trust the Sanford Police Department and anything to do with their investigation. She relays how he went to the store. When he came out from the store, he said it was starting to rain. He said he was going to try to make it home before it rained. And then he tells her it starts raining hard. He runs into the apartment complex and runs to the first building he sees to try to get out of the rain. He was trying to get shelter. So he tries to get out of the rain, and unbeknownst to him at all that he's being watched or anything, he's just a kid trying to get home from the store and get out of the rain. That's it, nothing else. And so he stands under that apartment building for a few minutes. The rain kind of dies down. He then goes, and he has his hoodie on because it's raining, and he goes back to walking, and he goes back to talking to her again. You'll see the phone calls when it came in at 6:54. He then says, you know, I think this dude is following me. And she talks about how he kind of slows down, and he's trying to look in the car, say, I think this dude is following me. And she tells him, oh, baby, be careful. Just run home. She tells him that. And you remember from the 911 tape, Zimmerman tells the police, oh, he's coming at me. He's looking at me strange. He's checking me out. He had no idea who this man was who was following him. And so he starts to run. And then what do we know from Zimmerman's 911 call that you all heard the recording? Zimmerman gets out of his car and pursues him. And how do we know? One thing, the dispatcher says, are you chasing him? And he says, yes. And we hear him breathing hard. And they say, we don't need you to do that. And Zimmerman says, okay. But as the dispatcher asked Zimmerman, where can we reach at? Where will you be? Where will you be in the truck? You remember his answer. He says, just call me on my cell phone. He had no intention of getting back in his truck doing what the police instructed him to do. He kept pursuing Trayvon Martin. And how do we know? Because this young lady connects the dots. She connects the dots. She completely blows Zimmerman absurd self-defense claim out of the water. She says that Trayvon says he's going to try to lose him. He's running, trying to lose him. And she says, he tells her, I think I lost him. And so he's walking, and then she says that he says, very simply, oh, he's right behind me. He's right behind me again. And so she says, run. He says, I'm not going to run. I'm just going to walk fast. And at that point, she says, Trayvon, she hears Trayvon say, why are you following me? And that's when she says she hears another voice say, what are you doing around here? And again, Trayvon says, why are you following me? And that's when she says, again, he said, what are you doing around here? And she says, Trayvon is pushed, and the reason she concludes he's pushed is because she says his voice kind of changes like something interrupted his speech. And then the other thing is she believes the earplug fell out of his ear because she no longer has contact. She can hear faint noises, but she no longer has the contact. And she says she hears an altercation going, and she said then suddenly somebody must have hit the phone, and it went out because that's the last she hears. Now, what's significant about that, you remember Zimmerman, he got off the phone. Trayvon Martin never got off the phone. It's only the phone knocks off, and you hear that 911 tape that he tells the dispatcher he gets off the phone. Now, if you're worried or you're concerned, why get off the 911 call? Logically, it makes sense that Trayvon Martin was the voice you heard crying on that tape. You heard Zimmerman's voice at the beginning of that tape, and you hear who's crying on that tape. You can conclude who is the person screaming out for help, presumably when they see a gun. And we know Trayvon Martin has Skittles. He was a 17-year-old kid, 145 pounds approximately. George Zimmerman, a man over 200 pounds, 28 years old with a 9mm gun. Now, it gets really telling here. We have his phone records, and it really shows, real simple, if you can hold that, the level of his calls. And it's a situation, and this is what all America wants to know. We pretty much have documentation completely on this case leading up to everything Zimmerman did. And we know, based on the police report, some time factors and some time frames. It is a situation, these phone records clearly show that the last call that came in to Trayvon Martin's phone was made at 7:12 p.m. by his young friend who he had talked to all day and pretty much all week long. A kid who is up to no good isn't on the phone constantly calling his friends back. Somebody who's looking to break in somewhere isn't on the phone talking to their friend when she's in Miami. That isn't what happens if he's up to no good. She says he's his regular self. All this stuff about him being high and stuff is preposterous. It's what Zimmerman wants you to believe so he can justify killing this kid in cold blood. Trayvon Martin's mother and dad and all his teachers, they've given the information about what kind of person Trayvon Martin was. And in this phone record, as we said, it's 7:12. We make the last call. That call lasted for 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Now, what's very telling, very, very telling, is the fact that the Sanford Police Department documents that they arrived on the scene at 7:17, less than 5 minutes after she makes that phone call. And what that tells us is that there wasn't much time at all during this altercation. And she was on the phone for 4 of those minutes. So this claim that Trayvon Martin was the aggressor is preposterous. And it cannot be allowed to stand because we have all the evidence now. We have 3 independent witnesses who say in their backyard, and they came forward, they don't know the Martin family at all. They don't have a dog in this fight. They are just good people telling what they observed, what they heard. And what they heard was, it was the kid, Trayvon Martin, screaming out for help on that 911 call. And also, you hear the 911 call. And the 911 call concludes real clear of the voices. And voice experts and sound experts are running that tape, and they are finding the evidence as to the voice that was on that tape crying out for help. And it breaks Sabrina Fulton's heart. It breaks Tracy Martin's heart that their son was crying out for help and that he was still shot. Now, you go back and listen to George Zimmerman's 911 call. I request, I implore, and I beg you on behalf of Sabrina Martin and Tracy Martin, I implore you to listen to him. Listen how he's talking, how his words slur. And you scratch your head and you ask yourself, why didn't the Sanford Police Department do a drug and alcohol analysis on him? They did one on Trayvon Martin, who was dead on the ground. Why didn't they do it on George Zimmerman? You ask yourself, why didn't they take a background check on the man who had just killed this kid in cold blood? They did a background check on Trayvon Martin, the young dead black boy on the ground. Why didn't they do one on George Zimmerman? This is what America is crying out for. They have looked at the information and they don't understand, like his mama and his father don't understand why the killer of their child has not been arrested. How long is it going to take? March 26th will be 1 month. What's equally telling is that the Sanford Police Department has this police report that documents the times. We know the lengths of times between Zimmerman's 911 call and the call from the young lady at 7:12 p.m. We know we have a lot of people, 7 people call, and you hear noise in the background. The dots have all been connected. Arrest George Zimmerman for the killing of Trayvon Martin in cold blood today. Arrest this killer. He killed this child in cold blood. Right now, he is free as a jaybird. He's allowed to go and come as he please, while Trayvon Martin is in a grave. Try to ask, well, before I do that, we're giving this to the Justice Department. We're going to play Jeff.
Trayvon had run for it, and then the man, and then he said he lost the man, and then the man comes, and then Trayvon said the man was following him, and then Trayvon asked for Trayvon to run, and Trayvon said he ain't gonna run like that. He was gonna walk fast from the back. And the man was just following him, close, like walking to him like fast, like when Trayvon walked that he was walking fast. That's what like he getting close by him. I like, boy, run. And Trayvon said he's not gonna run. And then they shot here. Trayvon said, what you following me for? And the man told me, what you doing around here? And that's out here. Somebody push. You can know somebody push Trayvon because the head set this down. And then after that, somebody had talked to him and to the phone be shut off. And I had called him again, and he had not answered the phone.
I'm going to play it once more, and this will be given to the Justice Department investigation. The family does not trust the Sanford Police Department to investigate it fairly and impartially because the previous lies that they feel they've been told by the Sanford Police Department. And it's sad because had they just arrested George Zimmerman, it would have silenced a lot of their concerns and questions. Self-defense is a legal argument that you make in a courtroom, not an argument you make on the side of the road to a police and get to go home and go to bed or flee even. Nobody's heard of where George Zimmerman's whereabouts are. And the one thing is for certain, had this been Trayvon Martin who pulled the trigger, we will all know of the whereabouts of Trayvon Martin because he would be in a jail somewhere. Now, you all have to ask yourself, why is that?
Before you play it again, can you be clear on what are we listening to? Who is she speaking to?
She is speaking to me, and she is telling about what happened, and this is going to the Justice Department. And again, I ask you not to reveal her reveal her identity for her privacy. She is a minor child.
Hold it up just a little bit higher.
Okay, I'll hold it up there.
Turn it, yeah.
Okay.
Am I in the way?
Yeah, turn it toward the camera, yeah.
Okay.
Trayvon had run for it, and then the man, and then he said he lost the man, and then the man comes, and then Trayvon said the man was following him, and then Trayvon asked for Trayvon to run, and Trayvon said he ain't gonna run like that, he was gonna walk fast from the back. The man was just following him, comes like walking to him like fast, like when Trayvon walking back, he was walking fast. That's what the problem. Like he getting close by him, I'm like, boy, run. And Trayvon said he's not gonna run. And then shot here. Trayvon said, what you following me for? And the man told me, what you doing around here? And I sat here, and I push. You can know somebody push Trayvon because the head stepped and fell. And then after that, somebody had to talk to him and to the phone be shut off. And I had called him again, and he had not answered the phone.
Have you made
Ladies
a
and-
transcript of that?
No, I haven't yet. We just literally took it last night. Her parents are gravely concerned about her health and her safety, as well as her general well-being of trying not to have her life disturbed any farther than it is. And my legal team and I, we assured her that we would not have her identity revealed and that we will respect their wishes as it relates to their minor child. My co-counsels, Attorney Natalie Jackson, Attorney Patricia Jones, Attorney Jasmine Rand, Attorney Darrell Parks, it was a hard decision to even talk to you, but we wanted to try to let America know. We wanted to make sure that you all connected the dots and you knew. We didn't want to, we don't understand why it was so hard getting 911 tapes released. They're not going to change and so forth. And so it's one of those things, we want to get this to the Justice Department. They've now started their investigation, and we are relieved that the Justice Department, we thank all the people who signed the petition because that gives the family hope that one day this person who shot their son, this Neighborhood Watch Homeowners Association, loose cannon, who killed their son, will be brought to justice. He will be arrested, prosecuted, and convicted. And they're hopeful because of all of the people out there keep signing the petition. Now, I want to say this, and we're going to try to get to your questions. It's one of those things that even though the Justice Department and the FBI have opened up an investigation, we will not stop, we will not rest until he is arrested. We don't understand why he's not arrested. Investigations can go on forever. And the family worries, I worry, the more time that passes, this is going to be swept under the rug. we will have a lot more assurance and we'll sleep a lot better if he is arrested, at least. And then we think it's harder for them to sweep it under the rug if he's arrested. We don't want the buck past the agency. We want to have George Zimmerman arrested for killing Trayvon Martin in cold blood. He had a 9mm gun. Trayvon Martin had a bag of Skittles. Where is the self-defense in that?
I just want to get your reaction. Apparently the Seminole State Attorney announced that they would be presenting this case to a grand jury sometime next month. Is the family going to be cooperating, and is this witness going to be made available to that?
Well, the witness is going to be with the Justice Department. She's a minor, so I'm sure as long as they protect their identity and do the things that they have to do when you're dealing with a minor, certainly. But it's one of those things that her life has been devastated enough. You, for the sake of decency, you want these kids to have as much of a normal life as possible. Who wants their teenager to have to hear a friend of theirs minutes before he's dead? That is just traumatic to her. So, as it relates to the grand jury, you know, we predicted it's almost like a playbook that they must have. And you find it in a lot of times when minorities are killed, that they won't arrest a person. They will always prolong a lengthy investigation, and then they'll pass the buck to the next agency, and then they attempt to pass the buck to a grand jury. Now, grand jury proceedings in Florida are private. Nobody's going to know what happens in that room. So whatever case that the state attorney puts on, we'll never know. So if the grand jury comes out and says they don't have enough probable cause to indict and arrest George Zimmerman, they then get to come out with their hands clean like Pontius Pilate and say, oh, it wasn't us, it was the community. Now, reverse that for a second. When does Trayvon Martin get that consideration? Had he pulled the trigger, would he have gotten a grand jury, or would he have been arrested day one and been prosecuted to the full extent of the law? Ladies and gentlemen, it's real simple. It is really, really simple. It's about equal justice. No matter who kills somebody in America, no matter where it's at, they have to be held accountable. We can't be the beacon of hope and justice for the rest of the world if we don't have equal justice for everybody. Trayvon Martin's mother and father are not asking for an eye for an eye. They are just asking for an arrest. Wouldn't you want that if that was your child? The person who killed your child in cold blood, your unarmed child, your child who only had a bag of Skittles and iced tea coming home in the rain. Wouldn't you want the person to be arrested?
Mr. Crump, we're hearing a lot about stand your ground law, and that's part of the rationale why that hasn't been an arrest made. At what point, if this case never comes to an arrest or a prosecution, at what point does this crusade become maybe an effort to change the stand your ground law?
Well, you know, it's interesting you say that. Let me say one thing about the stand your ground, and then it's interesting you bring up the law. The stand your ground argument that is put forth by Zimmerman is a legal argument. It's a legal argument that you make before a judge and a jury. Attorney Farmer and I, we make arguments in court all the time, but we can't go make the police officer on the street the judge and the jury, and they don't have the authority to be the judge and the jury. They are supposed to do a thorough investigation, and when they have probable cause, they're supposed to arrest them. They're supposed to arrest a person. What does that work anywhere else in the world where you say, hold on, I killed somebody, and when the police get there, I say it was self-defense. The police just ask me a few questions, don't even take my background check and say, okay, pat me on the shoulder, and almost as Mr. Martin says, like Zimmerman is the victim. Like, we're sorry you had to endure killing this teenager. That's how it looks to the family. They make it look like Zimmerman is the victim and their son is in the grave. That doesn't make sense to them. That doesn't make sense to anybody. It doesn't make sense to almost 600,000 people who signed the petition. How long before an arrest is made in this Skittles case? How long? And as it relates to the stand your ground law, there are already some state legislators, Perry Thurston, who's a representative out of Fort Lauderdale, is already drafting legislation to say that if you are the aggressor, you cannot then come and claim self-defense. It's preposterous, and everybody knows you can't go pick a fight with somebody and then say, oh, self-defense when I shoot you. That doesn't even pass the common sense test. Thank you. If there's no further questions. Yes, sir.
Are you going to ask, or have you asked for the ouster of the police chief of Sanford?
Well, the community has asked for it. I will talk with my clients and see how they feel, and we will respond on March 26th at the city commission meeting, where the mother and the father and their representatives will be allowed to address the city commission, and we expect that it's going to be a couple of thousand people there coming out showing the city commission that we have serious problems with how this investigation was handled, and there are people from all across the country. I know NFL star Ray Lewis and a lot of the national people are going to be there. Radio commentators, ministers are going to be there to express their concern about why George Zimmerman has not been arrested for the murder of Trayvon Martin.
What is your expectation, your client's expectation for the DOJ? You asked them to get involved, now they're involved. What's your expectation?
Well, it is our expectation, our hope, and our belief, our prayer, and whatever word we can come up with, that they will arrest George Zimmerman for the murder of Trayvon Martin. And it is one of those things, we first just want the arrest, and then as Mr. Martin said, we want the prosecution and we want the conviction. We have lived in this world long enough to know that the more time goes by that he's not arrested, the less likely it is that he would ever be arrested, and that Trayvon Martin's murder would be swept under the rug and his death would be in vain.
Legal question, does federal law kind of supersede state law when it comes to murder, or how does that
Well,
work?
it's one of the things that we're meeting with the Department of Justice in this week, and we're going to talk with them about what things they feel they can do and can't do.
And when you talk about the stand your ground, you said it should be a courtroom argument for a law, a judge and a jury. But the actual statute itself says that, under this, the person is exempt. There's immunity for criminal prosecution, and that the determination can be made by a law enforcement agent.
Okay,
That's in the statute.
Great question. Let's reverse the situation. Trayvon Martin shot George Zimmerman. Do the police ever give him the right to say, we're not going to arrest you, we're going to wait till we get to court, don't worry about it, go home and go to sleep? That's what it's about.
You mentioned the police report earlier. In that police report, it also talks about Zimmerman having a bloody nose, blood on the back of his head, grass stains on the back of his shirt. How did that transpire according to what you know?
I haven't seen any hospital records of George Zimmerman. Everything is based on Zimmerman and the police. Now, let me tell you a few things about this police investigation. The first preliminary report said nothing about Zimmerman's bloody nose or blood on his head or that his clothes was wet. And we know Trayvon Martin's clothes were wet as well. And we know Trayvon Martin had the more serious injuries of the two. We know that. Now, it's only after the public and the press started asking questions that they then release additional information on the preliminary report. And they seem to release information when it helps George Zimmerman's argument. But when we were asking for information, we had to file a lawsuit when obviously the 911 tapes helps Trayvon Martin's claim that he was killed in cold blood. So you have to ask yourself a lot of things about this investigation. And I hate to beat a dead horse, but how can I kill somebody and you don't even run my background check? You just take my word for it. They took George Zimmerman's word that this was a young black man who, because he had a hoodie, was suspicious and that he was up to no good. And what else he say? Oh, he was high. We had a rash of break-ins. He profiled this kid, stereotyped this kid, and Trayvon Martin is dead because George Zimmerman was overzealous and profiled and killed this young black child.
Do we know whose blood was on Zimmerman? Did they run any blood
We don't have that information. We just got to take their word for it. We haven't.
As far as you know, nobody, did they take the shirt? We can't do the blood test?
You know how hard we've tried to get them to release everything, just give everything up. They're not going to do that. I'm happy that we have oversight from the federal government because the family has no confidence whatsoever in the investigation of the Sanford Police Department. And if the state attorney is relying on the Sanford Police Department's investigation, we predict that George Zimmerman is not going to be held accountable. He's going to get away scot-free with killing this kid because, as we stand here today, I attest to you, the family and I believe they never intended on arresting George Zimmerman for killing their child. And it wasn't until we got involved and we started making a lot of noise about it. Had the family not called us and nobody said nothing, y'all know it would have been another black child killed and nobody would have said a word. And that's the tragedy in this. The police was so easily to accept that his life really didn't matter that much, that we don't even have to take a background check. And that's the tragedy of this whole Trayvon Martin matter, that unless the people got involved, our government officials were willing to say, it's really not that important. Well, it is important to Sabrina Fulton, it's important to Tracy Martin, and now it's important to many people around the world. I thank you so much.